Good morning, evening, or night, wherever you are. Welcome to WHAM today. Take a deep breath, clear your mind, and let's drift through the whispers of today's world, one quiet thought at a time. As we wrap up Sunday, 27th April, 2025, let's see what stories are unfolding around us. United States. The U.S. economy continues to face headwinds, exacerbated by lingering trade tensions stemming from tariffs enacted during the Trump administration. Chinese exporters, seeking to circumvent these tariffs, are increasingly establishing facilities within the U.S., despite the logistical and financial hurdles involved. Shein, a major online retailer, increased U.S. prices by as much as 377%. Ahead of tariff increases. Former President Trump has weighed in on international affairs, suggesting tougher sanctions on Russia, and meeting with Ukrainian President Zelensky, aiming to facilitate a deal to end the war in Ukraine. Trump also asserted that U.S. ships should have unrestricted passage through the Panama and Suez canals. Simultaneously, the U.S. and Iran have resumed discussions regarding Iran's nuclear program. The long-term decline of the U.S. coal industry remains a concern, with potential policy changes proposed during the Trump era continuing to impact the sector. In legal news, a U.S. judge has temporarily blocked immigration deportations in West Texas. Wall Street is bracing for a busy week, with market focus on big tech earnings reports and crucial U.S. jobs data. Predictions for the stock market indicate potential gains for the S&P 500, Dow Jones, and Nasdaq, with particular attention directed towards the performance of Apple and Microsoft. Following a shaky start to the week, Wall Street rebounded, recovering Monday's losses as the dollar and U.S. bond market stabilized, with U.S. stocks extending their rally as the market eyes a busy calendar. Next week's economic calendar includes U.S. and Eurozone core GDP figures, U.S. non-farm payroll data, China's PMI, and the annual Berkshire Hathaway shareholder meeting, along with earnings releases from Microsoft, Apple, Meta, and Amazon. The Trade Development Council believes the U.S. tariff war will not kill Hong Kong. U.S.-Europe ties are expected to worsen before any improvement occurs. Finance ministers worldwide are demanding a U.S.-China trade deal. Russia-Ukraine conflict. Russia has accused Ukraine of involvement in the car bombing that resulted in the death of a general near Moscow. Russian authorities have detained a suspect, alleging he is a Ukrainian agent who confessed to being paid by Ukraine to carry out the attack. Russia also claims to have regained full control of Kursk from Ukraine. However, Ukraine denies this, stating that fighting continues in the region. Russia says all Ukrainian troops have left the Kursk region as Zelensky meets Trump at Vatican. British intelligence reports detail Russia's recruitment of foreign mercenaries to fight in Ukraine. Russia launched nearly 150 drones against Ukraine. A top Russian general confirmed the dispatch of North Korean troops to the Ukraine war. Senator Rubio stated that the upcoming week is critical for Russia-Ukraine war negotiations, following President Donald Trump's questioning of Russian President Vladimir Putin's desire to end the conflict. China. Chinese exporters are increasingly establishing facilities in the U.S. to avoid high tariffs, though this process is often fraught with challenges. China believes that only firm opposition from a united international community will convince the U.S. to change its current course of action regarding trade. Bully. Next week's schedule includes us and Eurozone core GDP, U.S. non-farm payroll, China PMI, Buffett's shareholder meeting, Microsoft, Apple, Meta, and Amazon earnings reports. Finance ministers worldwide are demanding a U.S.-China trade deal. Iran. The U.S. and Iran have resumed nuclear program talks amid signs of progress. Putin ordered Russian emergency planes to Iran after a blast at the port of Bandar Abbas. Others. Turning to Canada, Prime Minister Carney has offered commentary on the ongoing U.S. trade negotiation. In Russia, Putin is scheduled to meet with the head of FIFA in Sochi and McDonald's has applied to register a trademark. China's industrial profits have shown a return to growth in the first quarter, despite ongoing trade tensions with the US that are expected to exert further pressure. China's property market is displaying signs of recovery, fueled by improved sentiment, and the nation is widening tax rebates for foreign tourists to bolster spending. Innovation and self-reliance are becoming hallmarks of China's tech startups, exemplified by Huawei's development of a new AI processor, while US brands are losing appeal amid slowing economic growth. Nike, however, remains committed to driving sports growth in China. China is actively managing trade relations, having eased some tariffs on US goods, while warning countries against striking trade deals with the US at its expense, criticizing the extreme selfishness of tariffs. China also intends to impose a 34% tariff on all US goods. The country claims sovereignty over a disputed reef in the South China Sea and is scrutinizing KK Hutchison's ports deal, warning against evading antitrust review. The food delivery market in China is experiencing a shake-up as JD challenges Meituan, leading to accusations of blocking delivery riders from accepting orders from rival platforms. China's agriculture and AI strategy aims to improve sufficiency, potentially reshaping regional and global trade. India's economic outlook remains positive, with the Reserve Bank projecting a 6.5% growth rate despite global uncertainty. Prime Minister Narendra Modi highlighted the efficiency and cost-effectiveness of India's space program on the global stage. The Indian IPO market is showing renewed vigor, marked by multiple IPOs and listings, including notable names like Ather Energy and Wagons Learning. Foreign portfolio investors are demonstrating confidence, injecting substantial investments into Indian equities, totaling $17,425 crore in a single week. Experts forecast that India is on track to surpass Germany and Japan as the world's third-largest economy by 2025. Apple's initiative to ramp up iPhone production in India is viewed cautiously by some analysts who doubt the feasibility of relocating all U.S. iPhone assembly. Suzlon Energy is currently a leading company in India's wind energy sector, navigating market fluctuations. Geopolitical tensions between India and Pakistan, especially after the recent Kashmir attack, are expected to trigger volatility in the Indian stock market. These tensions are coupled with factors like Q4 results, foreign fund flows, monthly auto sales data, and global economic cues that will shape market trends this week. Indian equity benchmarks saw a decline as risk aversion increased following the Kashmir incident. Indian troops have responded to firing from Pakistani soldiers at border posts for 2 days in a row. Pakistan has taken measures including suspending trade with India, closing its airspace, and shutting the Shimla Pact. Technically analyzing the Indian stock market, experts indicate that the Nifty 50 could experience a bullish surge if it exceeds 24,400. Maintaining the 23,800 level is seen as critical for sustaining the Nifty's bullish trend. Falling below this level could lead to profit-taking, with significant support around 23,400. Investors are also closely watching US tariff negotiations, foreign institutional investor activity, and the release of key economic data in the coming week. Saudi Arabia's vision 2030 is progressing rapidly, fueled by significant financial growth and transformation. The Public Investment Fund, PIF, has upped its 2030 target to $2.67 trillion after outperforming the prior year's objective. Supporting this initiative, PIF Sanabul Investments is financially supporting a Middle Eastern tech startup with aspirations for a Saudi IPO. Yemina is reorganizing as a Saudi closed joint stock company, CJSC, and has announced an initial segment of a pre-IPO capital increase signaling a forthcoming IPO. Simultaneously, Saudi Arabia's international tourism revenue saw a remarkable 148% increase, leading all G20 countries. Passenger traffic in Saudi airports also surged by 46% in 2024. Non-oil exports reached a record high of $137 in 2024. The Saudi stock market experienced a slight downturn, with the Tadawul all-share index closing down 0.07% at 11,1756. Turning to Syria, Saudi Arabia and Qatar will collectively settle its outstanding arrears of approximately $15 to the World Bank, clearing the way for new financial aid. A Saudi minister has expressed gratitude for the IMF and World Bank's support for Syria's recovery efforts. In bilateral developments, Aurangzeb recently engaged in meetings with both the Chinese and Saudi finance ministers, while in the United States. Iran has expressed significant reservations regarding the potential success of its nuclear talks with the United States, emphasizing that the negotiations are complex, technical, and marked by persistent disagreements. Simultaneously, a massive explosion at the Iranian port of Bandar Abbas, reportedly connected to a missile fuel shipment, resulted in 5 fatalities and over 700 injuries. This explosion occurred while Iranian and U.S. representatives were engaged in their third round of nuclear discussions in Oman. The Kremlin has stated that Russia's President Putin offered Russian assistance to Iran following the explosion at the port. Europe is seeing a wave of deregulation to boost economic growth. Investor sentiment is becoming more positive. However, strategists are less optimistic about European stocks. Trade war risks are a concern. European shares gained following eased Sino-US trade tensions. European universities struggle to maintain neutrality amid global political crises. Turning to Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced new measures to combat rising inflation. The measures include targeted financial aid for low-income families. The goal is to ease the burden of increased living costs. These policies are being debated in Parliament. Opposition parties question their effectiveness. Shifting to Australia, the government is facing increasing pressure to address climate change. Recent extreme weather events have intensified public concern. The government is considering new renewable energy initiatives. Coal exports remain a contentious issue. Public demonstrations are planned to urge stronger action. In the United States, the Federal Reserve is expected to make further interest rate adjustments. Inflation data is being closely monitored. The economic outlook remains uncertain. Political tensions are high ahead of the midterm elections. Debates over social policy are intensifying. South Korea is gearing up for a presidential election, with Lee Jae-myung, a prominent liberal figure, having clinched his party's nomination. Concurrently, the leading opposition party has chosen a former head as their candidate for the upcoming presidential race. In other news from South Korea, the economy is facing challenges, evidenced by an unexpected contraction in the first quarter GDP. This downturn elevates the possibility of reduced interest rates. The savings bank industry's growing disparity necessitates regulatory changes. South Korean businesses are navigating uncertainties resulting from shifting trade policies. Investor confidence has diminished because of tariff concerns, which is affecting the performance of major stocks. Talks regarding exchange rates between South Korea and the United States are considered favorably by Lee Chang-yong. The potential employment of a weak South Korean currency as a bargaining chip in trade talks has also been noted. Australia is bracing for a projected Labour Party win on May 3rd, though the markets are expected to remain stable. There's a notable shift in Australian sentiment regarding reliance on the United States, particularly concerning potential non-intervention by former President Trump. Meanwhile, Australian consumers are navigating a period of financial strain. The Australian share market showed resilience, bouncing back after Trump walked back proposed tariffs. To alleviate financial pressures, Australians can access various support measures, including a $243 cost of living payment in May 2025 and Centrelink bonuses for retirees and others, disbursing $1,990 in February and an additional $2,100 in. Uranium company Paladin is experiencing a surge driven by easing tax concerns. Guzman y Gomez's expansion plans now face uncertainty because of Chipotle's struggles. Montaka's deal has put MEF Capital's Chris Mackay in the spotlight, and United Airlines is expanding its routes to Australia. The United States' trade policies are impacting global economies. These policies create challenges for key allies. The United Kingdom's car manufacturers are feeling the strain. Tariffs imposed by the US add to existing Brexit pressures. The transition to electric vehicles complicates matters further. The tariffs impact their largest export market. The European Union is also facing economic headwinds. Its pharmaceutical industry is a major concern. The EU exports the most medicine and chemicals to the US. Tariffs threaten these exports. This intensifies existing trade tensions. United States. The United States is grappling with the aftermath of recent storms, as FEMA faces scrutiny for allegedly denying aid to disaster survivors. Simultaneously, there's a growing debate about the potential for a recession, especially if the Federal Reserve continues its current interest rate policy. The political landscape is also heating up, with the Biden administration facing criticism over its handling of classified documents and ongoing investigations into Hunter Biden's business dealings. The Justice Department is reportedly nearing a decision on whether to indict Boeing for allegedly concealing information related to the 737 MAX crashes. China is closely monitoring the Canadian election, given Mark Carney's past involvement and business dealings in the region. The country is also focused on its economic growth, as recent data indicates a mixed recovery with some sectors still lagging. China's military modernization continues to be a concern for regional neighbors and the United States, with ongoing developments in its naval capabilities and strategic partnerships. The Chinese government is also facing increasing international pressure over its human rights record, particularly regarding the treatment of Uyghurs in Xinjiang and the crackdown on dissent in Hong Kong. Russia's military recruitment drive for the war in Ukraine sees only a small contribution from foreign nationals, according to UK intelligence assessments. Turning to the United Kingdom, banks are bracing to provide reassurance to households amid economic uncertainty, spurred by new tariffs, signaling a critical juncture for the nation's financial stability. Meanwhile, in the United States, Morgan Stanley has downplayed fears of an artificial intelligence slowdown, dismissing such concerns on Wall Street as unfounded. Furthermore, scrutiny continues on former President Trump, with analysts suggesting his policies, specifically concerning Ukraine and the weakening of U.S. institutions, align favorably with Russian President Putin's strategic objectives. India is facing heightened tensions with Pakistan over the Indus Waters Treaty, with both sides issuing strong statements. Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif warned of a forceful response to any perceived threats or violations. India's Oil Minister Puri also hinted at a strong reaction, referencing the Pahalgam attack. Escalating conflict has raised concerns about potential repercussions for the Indian stock market. The status of the Indus Waters Treaty remains uncertain, contributing to the strained relationship. South Africa faces a complex economic landscape, marked by both challenges and political maneuvering. The planned increase in value-added tax was withdrawn following political opposition. The finance minister warned of severe consequences resulting from this decision. Simultaneously, South Africa engaged in talks with Tanzania, leading to the lifting of a ban on farm imports. These developments occur within a context of broader economic volatility, as reflected in the slight fluctuations of the South African rand. In early trading, the nation is urged to prioritize strategic deal-making amidst ongoing market instability. Japan is preparing for potentially challenging trade talks with the U.S., with tariffs, the yen's value, and the Bank of Japan's monetary policy expected to be key points of contention. The initial effects of U.S. tariffs are already noticeable as the Nikkei stock index has fallen and the yen has gained strength. Shifting focus to Bangladesh, gold prices are elevated compared to those in India and Dubai. Elsewhere in Asia, Gestamp, a Spanish automotive parts manufacturer, is increasing its production in China, a move that stands out against broader trends. Turning to Thailand, Paipum has suggested creating a financial link between Thailand and Luxembourg. Before leaving Asia, Singaporean political figures have warned against external interference in the upcoming elections. In Ethiopia, the government raised $3.2 billion $24 million from selling 10% of the shares offered in its IPO over a 4-month period. In South Africa, Hawaii has inaugurated a smart logistics center in Johannesburg, which seeks to upgrade supply chains continent-wide. Nigeria's UBA is planning to raise $144.8 billion to meet new capital requirements and is moving towards full operations in France. Moving to the Middle East, Qatar and Saudi Arabia jointly announced they have settled Syria's outstanding debts to the World Bank Group. In Israel, the head of the central bank has cautioned that the Israeli economy is exposed to risks from tariffs. Finally, in the Americas, Chile's finance chief remains cautiously optimistic following trade discussions with the United States. And that's a wrap for today's news, because even headlines need a nap. Stay curious, stay kind, and let the noise fade as you find your quiet. Take care, stay awesome, and I'll see you next time on WHAM Today.